Well, I welcome the apology to the victims for the abuse, and that seems to be a sincere apology. But I find the lack of any criticism of the bishops for the secrecy, for the cover-up. He criticises his bishops quite strongly, but what he criticises them for is for not following canon law. In other words, not putting in place the sort of tribunals that Cardinal Brady has now been shown to have taken part in.
This oath of secrecy.
This oath of secrecy.
Yes.
So what he's really saying is you should have done far more of that. And even if they had those canonical trials in every case they knew about, it wouldn't have meant anything as far as criminal prosecutions are concerned, because those trials are kept secret. So it is just beyond me that he did not in any way refer to the secrecy and the cover-up, and I doubt very much if he's going to accept any resignations, because he will obviously feel that these bishops followed canon law, because he doesn't seem to find any fault with them otherwise.
Yeah, because I mean, what we're understanding now, particularly after the Cardinal Sean Brady's story, is that this oath of secrecy was a central tenet of their approach to paedophiles within their ranks, and then they imposed this oath of secrecy on children who were abused. There's another story in the Sunday Business Post today of another person who was involved in that as well. And this came from the Vatican. This instruction
came from the Vatican. And if a priest was found to have abused by one of these courts, and was even a penalty imposed, like he wasn't allowed to say Mass or hear confession, everyone had to keep it secret. And as we know, the victims had to keep it secret, which meant that that man went out into society with a completely clean bill of health, because nobody was told that he was an abuser. In many cases, as we know in the Sean Brady case, Brendan Smith, he was allowed to continue to wear his clerical garb. And the idea behind that is that you don't take away from his good name or the respect of the community. So people weren't told that he was an abuser and had been penalised within a canonical court as an abuser. So therefore, parents had no idea that he was a danger. The only people that knew were those within the church who had taken part in that canonical tribunal, the Vatican, and everybody else, including the victims, had to adhere to secrecy. And the Pope feels that these sort of tribunals should have taken place more often, and that's the only thing he appears to criticise his bishops for.
But if they had taken place more often, they would still have to take place within that very secret.
In secret.
So he's not saying anything about the fact that, in fact, that instruction came from the top of the Catholic Church.
It shows a total lack of insight. He's looking at it completely from the point of view that these abusers were not properly dealt with within canon law. In other words, they weren't penalised properly by their bishops. He says nothing about the fact that the information was not passed to the authorities and they were left in parishes where they were allowed to continue abusing. He completely ignores the Murphy Report's findings of the cover-up and the secrecy. He
That's
just
not
doesn't
really refer to it
at all.
Yes.
And I think unless that can be admitted to, I don't know where we go from here, because it's only canon law that appears to have any. It's really the Dooley view, you know, Monsignor Dooley's view that the world is ruled by canon law.
Yes, I know. Yeah,
if you read this letter, it more or less is the same view. I'd say Monsignor Dooley would go along with everything the Pope has said, because it's exactly his view. Canon law comes first.
It's kind of astounding. This letter has been described as being unprecedented. We'll get Paddy Agnew's views on this now in a moment, but it's been described as unprecedented, that this kind of thing has never happened, that a Pope would come out and apologise for something like this and have it read in the country where it's of relevance. And you would have thought, therefore, a great opportunity for the Vatican to recognise now that it needs to, if it's to move forward, if it's to have a place in society, that it needs to start opening up and acknowledging the sins of the past. But he's missed an opportunity.
He's missed a huge opportunity. I mean, it's sad that we have to be so amazed and so wondrous about the Pope addressing an issue in society. It's extraordinary that this is such a unique event. He had the opportunity, when he was setting down his concrete initiatives to address this situation, to address the future. He has put down 5, which are all involved with prayer and Eucharistic adoration
Yes,
and
yes.
so forth, which is fine. They're all what you would expect. But he could have added, there will be a zero tolerance policy towards abusing priests in the future in the church. Any priest who has been found to have abused a child will be immediately removed from the clerical state. That's a simple thing. Zero tolerance. If a priest or religious has abused, he will no longer be allowed to remain within the church. And also that every single complaint of abuse will be brought immediately to the civil authorities. He has talked about cooperating with the civil authorities, but he goes on to say that the guidelines, the child safety guidelines, should be in conformity with canon law. And we know from the Murphy report that canon law has a conflict with mandatory
Yes.
reporting. So when he's saying that the guidelines must be in conformity with canon law, he is actually saying they cannot include mandatory reporting.
Now, he's talking about sending a team of people here to do some investigations or whatever, which, seems to suggest that canon law, again, will take precedence over domestic laws and the job of the guards, you would have thought, which is to go in and investigate. But we're seeing more stories, as I said today in the Sunday Business Post, about more potential cover-ups involving an oath of secrecy and children being obliged to actually participate in an oath of secrecy. There's a whole question mark about the legality of all of that now. We may find, Mary Collins, that we're going to hear more and more stories, actually, of children who were subjected to oaths of secrecy, as perhaps more people, as adults now, feel they have the courage to come out.
That's right. The Pope in his letter has told abusers they must conceal nothing. In his section to the bishops, he could have said the same thing, but he didn't. But the point is, we don't need the bishops to come out. I think victims now, who have not so far spoken out and who were these oaths of secrecy were inflicted on them, will now, I hope, have the courage to come forward and speak out, because the Church has at all times depended on secrecy to cover everything up, and the victims and parents were made to collude in that secrecy, and I think that is what is coming to an end.